Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad you could join us today. We are still ramping up, getting started, but Duncan and I are looking forward to this being a really interactive session. So hopefully you'll be able to log into the account that we set up for you if you didn't have one already. If you missed an email, didn't get one from our system saying that you've been added to our UK instance, and you'd like to access the story that we're going to be using today so you can participate live, then go ahead and drop your email into the chat, and our support team will be happy to add you in. If you did get an email to sign up for the UK instance and have gotten your account all registered and things, you should, when you sign in, be able to see our story. It's called SharpCloud. It's called the Workshop Webinar, February 2021. And you should see that story on your dashboard and be able to hop into that. Again, if you don't for any reason, we have shared that to you through a team. So give us a message in the chat and we will try to troubleshoot that with you. If you didn't sign up for an account, if you don't want to bother with that, no worries. We're still going to make this very interactive. We've got some forms that we can share with you throughout, so you can still participate and add items in. And of course, you'll be able to watch what we're doing and what others are doing as well throughout the webinar. So no worries, no stress. If you're able to pop in, fantastic. We'll be happy to have you join us. We are going to go ahead and get started with this fun sign-in activity, a little icebreaker for us. We would love for you to, if you're in the story, you can click on this, or if you have your smartphone with you, you can just scan that QR code. Just open up your camera app, hold it up to the screen where the QR code is, and it should give you a browser window to open up with that form inside. I'm seeing a bunch of people are already logging in, signing in with us. That's fantastic. And you get extra points for even adding a picture. Way to go. And what that's going to ask you to do is just tell us a little bit about yourself. And we're going to use that in a little bit to show you some of the capabilities of SharpCloud. But it's just a fun way to get everybody started. So again, go ahead and scan that QR code, fill in the form, let us know that you're here while we're getting going. I would also like to note that while we've asked you to be participants today, we're also going to be highlighting some tips and tricks for you as facilitators as we go, because we are assuming that most of you are workshop facilitators, and that's probably why you've been interested in this webinar. So we're asking you to act as participants, but we're going to show you a little bit of behind the scenes of what we're doing as facilitators so you can get a sense for both sides of that experience. For those of you who are logged in, you'll mostly be able to stay focused on the story right in your browser. But when it would help for you to see what we're doing as facilitators, we'll let you know to switch back over to your Zoom window. So again, if you're inside the story itself, go ahead and you can mostly look at that, but we'll let you know when it's good to switch back over to Zoom. So one quick fun fact for you while we get started that you may not have known, but SharpCloud did not actually start out as a tool for running virtual workshops. Rather, we have long been a very powerful platform for helping users take very complex data and relationships and communicate those visually to help make better decisions in activities like road mapping, risk visualization, innovation pipelines, strategic planning, and loads more. What we learned along the way, though, is that a lot of those processes begin or they're supported by workshops. So as our users have shared their needs around this, we've been really excited to expand how our platform works to support them so that they can run their workshops right in the tool where their work is going to continue. And it just so happens that the way we structure and utilize data also gives our users some really important benefits when it comes to running effective workshops, which we're going to show you along the way today. So a quick look at our agenda for the session. Following a quick orientation to our workshop story, we're going to dive in and explore some best practices for tackling the challenge of engagement, both before, during, and after virtual workshops. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for questions, and in just a few minutes, we'll show you how you can submit those throughout the workshop. Seeing tons of people sign in. I'm seeing people live in the story. That's amazing, wonderful. We're so glad you're with us. Way to go getting those forms submitted. And to start off here, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off so that you can see the entire screen and give you a quick tour of that SharpCloud environment. Okay, so over on the left-hand side, you'll see a little icon, and that is part of our view strip. So one of the things that makes SharpCloud really stand out from a lot of other workshopping tools is the fact that every item or relationship line that we add into our story can be infused with points of data, and we call those attributes. As we move through the workshop, we're going to reveal additional views that can display all the items that we've been submitting according to that data, without us needing to copy them or rearrange them. So SharpCloud is going to take that data and it's automatically going to display them on views for us, depending on the kind of conversation we want to have around those. So let's take a look at one example. As you are joining today, of course, we invited you to create an item that represents you, and a number of you have done that. Way to go. And you gave us your name, your location, and the type of workshops that you typically run. So I'll open up myself as an example. There I am. I got my location here, and I typically run team building and brainstorming workshops. I see from this location data now. I don't read GPS. I don't read longitude, latitude, but I can take that data with SharpCloud and I can plot that on another view. So let's move over. Duncan has revealed my map view for me here, and I'm just going to click on that. And now we can see all of those exact same items that you saw on the first page are now plotted according to that GPS data on the map view. So we can see that we've got folks all over the United States. We've got some West Coast, East Coast, Midwest. We have folks in Europe. We've got a really nice representation here. Oh, someone else just popped in, looks like in the UK perhaps. And I can zoom in on this map and I can check out where exactly folks are joining us from. Jenny's here in Munich. Hello, Jenny. Got some folks in France, a bunch of folks in the UK. Someone up in, looks like Denmark perhaps, and welcome. See, this is a great way to just quickly get a sense of where is everybody joining us from in the workshop. Got someone all the way over in Qatar, it looks like, or near Qatar, Bahrain. Yeah, hi Chris, how are you? So just a fun way to welcome everybody to the workshop. You can also use this as a fun icebreaker to help each other get to know one another. If you have a team that's perhaps all located in a similar area, or maybe in the same country, you could use this as an icebreaker to say, go ahead and plot yourself where you wish you were joining us from today, or what's on your bucket list for your travel items. Again, just a fun way to use data to do some icebreakers and to start helping people feel engaged and connected in your workshop. So thank you so much for taking part in that, for letting us see who you are and what kind of workshops you're running. Now, excuse me, you'll notice that the view strip has changed. So as a facilitator, again, I'm able to hide and reveal the views for you so that we can all stay together and no one gets lost or distracted. Don't have to give you too many directions. Currently, we're on the map view and we've got one more additional view that has come into play here. And we're going to go ahead and move down onto that one for our first activity. One other view that I want to make sure we always have available is our question view. So if we go down to the question mark icon, you can see that this is where we'd love for you to submit questions. So throughout the workshop today, at any time, we're going to leave this question mark view open. And we also have a chat, a form that goes with that. And we'll drop the link to the question form in the chat as well for those of you who aren't logged into the story. But just coming to this view, our form's automatically going to pop out and you can very easily add questions as we're going. So just enter a short name for your question, add any more detail about it you want us to know, and let us know who you are by submitting your name here as well. And first name and last initial is fine. And go ahead and submit that, and then those will accumulate throughout the workshop, and we'll do something with those at the very end. All right. Let's go ahead and go back to our first activity. So before the workshop, we asked you to submit some of the challenges that you experience as a facilitator of virtual workshops. Now, I want you to think about where you already have experienced success engaging participants. Ideally, as a facilitator, obviously, we want to engage folks during the workshop, but I'm betting a lot of you have also realized the importance of engaging participants even before the workshop begins, as well as keeping them engaged once the workshop is over in that great work that you've gotten started. So what we're going to do on this page, on this activity, is we'd like to capture some of the practices that you have already found to be successful across these 3 periods. And we're going to start here in the before the workshop space. So you can see I've created an additional item with a star on it so you can keep track of where we're working. And if you're logged into the story, for those of you who are, looks like we had about 18 people logged into the story, which is fantastic. You can actually add ideas to this space just by double clicking in the space that we're working in. And when you do so, a new item is going to appear along with a quick edit form that's going to let you fill in some additional details about your best practice. Look at that. There they come. Nice job, everybody. So quick tip for you, when you create your item, if you accidentally click out of your item or click the background before you're done entering those details, you can actually get the quick edit form back just by right-clicking on the item. So you'll get that form back and you can add in your details. So go ahead and let's add a few best practices. I already see some floating in. We got some rebels going into the second square, the green square, before we're ready for that one. That's fine. I love a good rebel. But go ahead and add your items in, and do make sure that you are adding in a name and a description for those items so we can see what your thoughts are. So again, we're in the before the workshop area, and we're thinking about what are some things that you do before the workshop to start getting your participants engaged. And I actually have a form that I will drop into the chat. For those of you playing along at home who are not logged into the story, that will allow you to participate as well. All right, lots of great ideas coming in there. So again, that form is going to come into the chat. Duncan will drop that in there. And if you want to submit an item, go ahead and just make sure that you choose before the workshop for the current ones that we're submitting. Great job, everybody. These are looking really good. Now, as a facilitator, I can start to arrange these, align things a little bit, get things nice and neat. And clear off my text. All right, well done. Looks like we have a lot of good items already submitted. Thanks, everybody. So we'll come back to these. We'll talk about these a little bit more. Oh, and look at that. There's our first one from a form that someone sent in. So because someone sent this in through a form, it doesn't automatically appear in that box because they didn't double click to enter it, but it appears up here in what we call the tray. And as a facilitator, I can go ahead and just grab that and drag it down. I know what color it is where it's supposed to go because it's yellow. So I can just go ahead and drag that down into our box here. Fantastic. Thanks for doing that, everybody. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move our working star over to our green box. And let's go ahead and add some items there as well. What do you do during the workshop to engage participants? What are some things that you have found very helpful in keeping people engaged? And you'll notice that the items, as folks are creating items over here during the workshop, the color is different, right? The color is green. And these boxes are something that we call smart zones. So what we've done is we've created basically just a widget and an annotation on the screen here, and we've given it a color, but we've added some data properties to it. We've told SharpCloud, hey, anything that gets created in this zone of my screen, of my view here, I want you to give it this particular data attribute. So if in this case, the data attribute is, this is something that takes place or is useful during the workshop. So anything in this area automatically gets assigned that value and is therefore the right color. So you can have a lot of fun with smart zones. There's a lot of different things you can do with them. Looks like we got some other things being submitted. That's fantastic. Nice, we're seeing those come in. Great job. All right, well done, everybody. Looks like we got an empty item maybe submitted. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of that one. All right, really good job. Seeing lots of good things come in. I do see some items that still have item 58 or item 70 as their name. If you're still working on those, no problem. But if that was one of yours, do go ahead and just right click on it. That'll bring up the edit panel here so you can actually give it a name. Don't forget to give your item a name so we can see what it is at a glance. All right, great job. I'm going to go ahead and move my star over to the last section where we've already got some folks adding items in. And this again is going to be for after the workshop. You've done all this great work with folks. You've had a lot of fun. Really good ideas have been generated. What are you going to do after the workshop to keep people engaged and keep that conversation going so that it's not just a one-time thing? Awesome. Seeing great things come in. All right, couple coming in through the form. Thanks very much for those. Nice job. All right, looks like a couple things got submitted that were not associated, that didn't have an assigned value. So I'm going to guess this is part of our after the workshop. All right, so many great ideas. Well done, everybody. Thank you. Really, really fantastic work. So as you can see very quickly, we've been able to kind of create our own little virtual sticky wall here. And the great thing is I didn't have to tell any of you to use a certain sticky color. I just had to tell you where to put it, right? And SharpCloud automatically gave it the right color, gave it the right piece of data. And now as we go through our additional views, we're gonna be able to use that data that was automatically created for us without you having to do any extra work to display them on the right views in the right places. So thanks for doing that. Again, fantastic job. And we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Duncan, who's going to show you what we can do now to kind of filter out some of the noise a little bit and start to synthesize some of these ideas.
Thanks, Alyssa. I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen. And if you guys are following along inside the story, that's fantastic. But I'm just going to ask that you kind of focus in on the screen that I'm going to share here in a second. And kind of watch what I'm doing for this section of the workshop. So now that all of our best practices have been submitted, we're going to take a look, like Alyssa said, at a couple different ways that we can analyze and interact with these ideas or these submissions during a workshop. So we're going to start by looking at the best practices that you guys have identified as being helpful to facilitators or attendees for before the workshop starts. So oftentimes, when you're collecting this sort of information from a large number of participants, you'll encounter some overlap in the ideas that people are submitting. So what you may want to do is sort of condense or merge some of these items together, some of these similar items, so that you don't have any duplicates and that you can keep track of things fairly easily. So what I'm going to do is, as a facilitator, I'm going to start dragging some of these items down here and maybe start to create some groups of submissions that I think are similar. So we've got prep work here, pre-alignment meeting. Maybe we want to do some more pre-work collection of information of our participants, set up a story, perhaps ahead of time, prepare an agenda. So I've identified all of these different ideas as being similar to each other. So what I can do now is just by simply clicking and dragging and highlighting or selecting all of these items on the screen here, what I can do actually is identify all these similar ideas, and then just by right-clicking, I have the option to merge these items together. So when I do that, I'll be prompted here to select a master item. And all this means is I want to pick sort of the name and category and any other metadata to be sort of the face of my new item. So let's say that we want to prepare an agenda. We're going to call this item prepare an agenda. When I hit merge items here, you'll see now we just have one item called prepare an agenda. But when I drill down and I click on this item, I've actually saved all of the information from all those other submissions, which allows me to save sort of the nuance between all of the submissions for my participants so we don't lose any of that granularity. But now we've condensed it in a way that makes it easier for us to maybe iterate on these items in a future workshop. Maybe we're running a workshop right now focused around innovation, and we want to move these ideas into a research pipeline. Or maybe we're running a strategic planning brainstorming workshop, and we want to now view this item on a timeline. Condensing these items down and merging them together makes it really easy for us to now take them and continue to iterate on them at a later date. So this is kind of one way that you can work on these items during the workshop with your participants, I'm going to hand it back over to Alyssa, and she's going to cover a couple other ways that we might be able to engage participants around the work that we've already been doing in the workshop.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move us down to another view. It looks like a bunch of relationships being submitted. So what we have here is a view that shows us the challenges that you all submitted before the workshop. So you should have received an email asking you to submit some of the challenges you face as a virtual workshop facilitator. And then now we have our best practices that have been submitted for keeping folks engaged during the workshop. And what this is going to allow us to do, one of the really powerful features of SharpCloud, is we're going to be able to create and display relationships between these items. So a lot of whiteboard tools allow you to draw lines, but with SharpCloud, your relationship lines actually become part of your story's data, which means that we can filter out certain types of lines, which I'll show you in just a second. But to begin, for those of you who are in the story with us, go ahead and join me on this view. And at the top, you're going to notice a toolbar. And this toolbar will allow you to create lines between some of these items. So let's draw lines between our challenges and best practices where we see there might be something among our best practices that can help meet one of our challenges. So if I want to do that, let's say I'm going to choose my arrow line here. I can leave it on the default color, which is just a nice gray and a default thickness, or I can assign some additional data to my relationship line by actually giving it a value. So how hard is it going to be to leverage this particular best practice, for instance, in meeting this challenge? And if we might want to say, how strong of a connection is it? How well is this going to help us to meet this challenge? So how hard is it? And then how successful are we going to be? How strong of a connection is it going to be? So once I've selected that, excuse me, let's say I'll pick a medium difficulty and medium connection. All I have to do, and I see a couple of you jumping in already, which is great. All I have to do is grab a challenge and draw it, grab best practice rather, and draw it to one of the connections. So for strategy alignment, helping to align that strategy is going to help make connections perhaps for people. So I can draw that line there. Great, and I'm seeing some other lines show up. So I'm not going to put a lot of brackets around this for you or a lot of limitations. Go ahead and choose any lines you like. I'm not going to worry about the direction for this particular exercise. Choose any color, any thickness, any line you like. The point really is just for you to get a handle on how do we easily draw these relationships and start to see connections between things. So that's fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of things come in. A few people are dropping these options down and choosing some different colors and thicknesses. So that's great. Some are sticking with default, and that's fine as well. Nice job, everybody. All right, great job. And now what we can do, again, because these are showing connections and these are data, we can actually they're not just lines on the screen. I can click on, for example, let's say this one's got a lot going on. I can click on this item, and that's going to drop away everything else in the background, so I can just see the things that this one is connected to, that people have drawn connections to it. I can even bring that into the center and look in more of a radial view. And if I want to, I can use that to follow a kind of a train of thought and say, what is this one connected to? Or go back to this and say anything else connected to quiz and polls? Ah, looks like that's going to help ensure participation. Any other best practices that are going to help us ensure participation? Looks like we have fun, some ground rules, and then keeping it interactive, taking breaks. So I can use that again, these relationship lines, to see how everything in our idea web here is connected. And it can start to look a little bit messy, a little crowded, with all these lines. And that's really where our filters can come in. Again, because these lines are not just drawn two-dimensionally onto a screen, because these are actually data points, we can tell SharpCloud what we do or don't want to see from these lines. So if I bring up my interactive filter bar here, you can see I've got my two types of lines. I have the thickness, right, by strength, and I have the color of difficulty. And I can choose to now filter in or out some of these lines. So I might say, you know what, I only want to look at things that have a very strong connection. And I only perhaps want to look at things that are lower difficulty, right? So that's going to immediately filter out all of that noise and only show me those lines that I want to see, the types of relationships that I'm interested in. I'll go ahead and reset that though, so we can see all of our lines. But I think you can very quickly see how much power there is to this as you're trying to have conversations, trying to keep everybody focused, and trying to make sure that you are zooming in on exactly what's important. We'll just click reset so we can see all those lines. All right, great job, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed creating some relationship lines there. Again, we're partway through the workshop. I want to make sure that everyone remembers we have a question view down here. So as you're seeing these things put into practice, if questions are being generated for you, that's amazing and fantastic. Go ahead to that question mark view and go ahead and submit those, and we'll come to those in just a little while. Next up, though, we're going to see one additional thing that we can do with our relationship data, and Duncan's going to walk us through that. So go ahead, Duncan.
Okay, so I've navigated to the next view on the left-hand side, which is just the 5 tally marks. If you guys want to follow along with me, you can jump to that view as well. So like Alyssa mentioned, now that we've created some of these relationships, we can actually start to visualize these data points that we've been creating, because this is such a data-driven workshop. So what I've done here is I've created a view that shows me the number of relationships that each of our challenges has on the left-hand side. So we can see that we actually have 6 relationships to some best practices to help us ensure participation. So this challenge, we know we have a lot of different things that are helping us cover that. But if we look down towards the bottom, we can see that we have quite a few of these challenges that have either no relationships or maybe just a single relationship to a best practice. So now that gives us a little bit more of a clear understanding about where we might want to maybe create some action items to help us address some of these challenges that maybe haven't been connected to a best practice yet. So if you're following along with me in the story, I'm going to ask you to jump to the next view here. So what I've done here is I've set up another layer view, which has 3 swim lanes corresponding to a time horizon. Now, this time horizon, this is going to be how long it's going to take for us to implement some action items that we're going to be creating. You'll also notice that I've included some of these challenges up here in what we call the tray. So what that allows us to do is visualize which of these challenges we're going to be creating action items for. And I've actually gone ahead and filtered it down so that we can only see those challenges that either have no relationships at all, or maybe just a single relationship. So these are items that potentially could still be challenging to us that we might want to create some action items for. So just like we were doing earlier, you can either double click or right click in any one of these swim lanes to create an item. You don't have to worry about drawing relationships. But what you'll see is in this quick edit window, I've included 2 additional attributes that I'd like you guys to add data points for, and those are feasibility and impact. So when you're creating these different action items to help us address these different challenges, I'd like you to also add a value for how feasible it's going to be and how impactful this action item is going to be, because that's going to help us visualize these different action items in a couple of different ways and help us determine what our sort of priorities are going to be. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to create some action items around the challenges that we see in the tray, and then I'll check back with you guys in a second. This is looking really good. Be sure to give some of these items names as well. I see a couple in here that are just called, item 50, 59, or 75. Be sure to give some of these action items names as well. Awesome, great job. So now that we have all of these different action items and for both the short, medium, and long term, what we can do now is navigate to this next view, and you guys can follow along if you're in the story just by clicking on this action item view in the view strip on the left-hand side. And that will take us to our next view, which is actually a matrix that shows us how not only feasible and impactful these items are going to be based on those 2 data points that you provided. So you can see that we've actually plotted those 2 attributes on our axes here. And what I've also done is I've used those data points and I've calculated a priority rating based on how impactful and how feasible these items are. So what that allows us to do is it makes it really easy for us to filter out some of the noise. Maybe we're not concerned about what's very low or has a low priority rating based on our calculations. And we want to focus in on maybe just our high priority items. Using this sort of really data-driven approach to the workshopping environment makes it really easy for us to understand, what are our high priority items? Where do I need to devote my energy first? And it's really that sets this sort of data-driven, highly interactive workshop apart from a lot of the other tools out there. So Alyssa, I'm going to hand it back to you, and we can cover off maybe the last section of best practices that were submitted.
All right, that looks great. Everybody, nice job on that impact matrix. I'm going to move down to this next view. And we know that after the workshop, what we want to see is a continued conversation. So what we hear from a lot of our facilitators is that once we have this great energy during the workshop, everyone's really excited, and we've got a lot of good energy, a lot of good creativity going. But then once the workshop is over, the end product of that is often just kind of a screenshot of the whiteboard sent out over email, maybe some other channels, might be put into a PowerPoint. But regardless, it kind of quickly becomes something that's very static and easily overlooked, maybe even forgotten about. You lose that energy when you leave the tool. So in SharpCloud, again, because a lot of our facilitators are using this data to then continue the work, either to track that work or to continue down an innovation funnel, if that's the kind of work that they're doing, they want to keep that conversation going and keep it in context right here in SharpCloud. And one of the ways that we can do that is using our comments feature. So you'll notice that we have our best practices for after the workshop here. And if you go into the story, for those of you who are active in it, if you go over to the right-hand side at the top right, you'll notice a comments button. And if I pull open that comments panel, you'll see that I am commenting generally on the story to begin with. So I can leave a comment about the workshop story in general. Perhaps I want to let our facilitators know this was very helpful. And I might just add that comment to the entire story. But I also might want to comment on a particular item. So if I click on sending thank you after the workshop, you'll see now that is what's highlighted here in my comments panel. Just do a quick refresh because my comment needs to post. There we go. So if I want to click on sending a thank you after the workshop, I might actually just ask Duncan, do you want to handle this? And I can send that, and I can even send a notification email making sure that everyone knows I made that comment. So again, if I leave this item, if I take my focus off of that, then I can start to see all of my comments here in that panel. And you'll notice there are buttons, little number icons popping up on the items as comments are added, so that if I come into this story later and I want to know what's been updated, what's been commented on, I can very quickly see that visually, right? I know that someone has commented on feedback and implementation follow-up. So I'm seeing some great comments coming through. And again, what that's going to help us do is to keep this conversation in context. We're not sending out an image of the story or of the whiteboard over an email, and then we worry that not everyone replies all to that email, or someone joins the email chain late and they don't read through everything. Again, this is keeping everything right in context. The conversation's happening right where the work did, and the data that's been submitted can be interrogated, investigated, and then commented on. All right, great job. People are volunteering to help out with some of these items. Nice, very good. So that's just one more way of keeping that engagement high after the workshop happens. I also want to remind you that we're going to go into our questions view in just a second here. And if you have any questions that you want answered, do go ahead, take a moment now to fill those in. And I think the question form was also listed in the chat, but we can drop that in one more time as well. So I'm going to turn back over to Duncan, and he's going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do, an activity around our question items.
So if you're following along in the story, you can go ahead and I'm going to ask you to jump to the last view that you see on the left-hand side, which is the question mark. So what we have here is all of the questions that you guys have been submitting throughout the workshop. Thank you very much for these. Like Alyssa mentioned, one of the great ways that you can interact with other members of the workshop and get input from them is by voting. So what you're actually able to do is just by right-clicking on any one of these items, you'll see that I have the option to give it a thumbs up down on the bottom left-hand side. So I'm going to select one of these. We'll say the blank or incomplete item prevention question. If I give this a like, you'll see that it now starts to float to the top. So I can see that how many likes each of these questions have. So I'm going to ask you guys to read through some of these questions, give some of them likes if you'd like to have them answered live here during the webinar, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds here just to start liking some of these questions, and then we'll get you some answers to these as well. If you do have any other questions, you can enter another one using this form on the right-hand side of the view, or there is a link in the chat if you aren't with us directly in the story. Okay, looks like we got one up here with 5 likes already. Access for non-license holders, how to give people who don't have a license the ability to interact with the SharpCloud workshop. So there are sort of 2 levels. For those who are actually in the workshop with us, those users will need to have a SharpCloud license. You do also have the ability to make forms anonymous. So those who might not have a SharpCloud license, they'll still be able to enter information using forms, and then maybe yourself as a facilitator can share your screen. So there are a couple different options there for different levels of interaction depending on whether or not the user actually has a SharpCloud license.
And as we're expanding this workshop offering, we are looking at various models, ways that you can perhaps acquire temporary licenses for workshop participants. So know that that's something that we are digging into. If you're someone who runs a lot of workshops and would like to give us some feedback on how that can work, or kind of enter dialogue with us about that, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us. You can email us just at webinars@sharpcloud.com. Or you can also just reach out to Duncan or myself if you're connected with us as well.
Awesome. Let's get to another question here. So blank or incomplete item prevention. This is a great question, Steve. So a lot of the times when users are submitting questions into SharpCloud, they will be using forms. And you do have the option when you're creating the form to make certain fields required. So you do have that option when you're creating the form as the maybe workshop facilitator to determine you must give a description with your item submission, or maybe you have to give it a level of impact. And you also do have the ability to add filters onto the views to filter out items that might not have values that you're looking for. So you have a couple of different options there. Alyssa, as I'm going through these, are there any questions in the chat that I'm not seeing here?
Nope, one came through, but Jason was great and added that to the story for us.
Fantastic. Okay, how to start, how to allow others to live input into a workshop. So if you're talking about entering items, we went through a couple of those options today in terms of using forms. You can distribute those forms ahead of time to allow users to maybe start thinking about the content of your workshop before it actually begins. And then we have a couple of features like, smart zones, double clicking in those smart zones to create some really data-driven items. So you have a couple of different ways to actually engage with users and have them create items both before and during the workshop. Great questions. Template. Is it possible to share a story template with you as a starting point? So Great question, James. Absolutely. I know we will be sharing this story after the workshop is done, and we also have a couple other sample stories as well around workshopping. When you go to create a new story, you'll have the option to look through some of our samples, and I know we have a couple workshop sample templates in there as well. And we can absolutely work on creating a structure kind of like the one that we did today as a sample story as well. So great question. Okay, I'll go ahead and get to one more. Any questions that we don't have time to get to today, we'll absolutely address in a follow-up email. So no worries there. Let's jump into one more here. Relationship strength and importance. Can you change or update the relationship strength or importance as projects progress through a journey? Absolutely, great question. So because this is a data-driven workshop, everything we did here is data-driven. We do have the ability to continue to update and iterate on these different projects or ideas as we continue to implement around them. So you can absolutely update, the strength of a relationship to a challenge. For example, based on maybe the work that you do after a workshop, and then you can continue to keep track of that within the SharpCloud story after the workshop experience is complete. So great questions there. Okay.
And I want to just mention, oh, sorry, Duncan.
No, go ahead.
Real quick.
Go ahead,
you might have noticed when Duncan had one of our question items open, we've actually added a panel to the item that includes the answer. So as we finish up the workshop today, we'll go through and we'll actually enter in some answers to these questions rather than including them all in a very long email for you to read. What we're going to do after the workshop is we're going to share a public link to this story. So even though you'll lose access to edit this story after the workshop, you will have access to view it, including all of the items that were submitted. So you'll be able to come back to this particular view and all the views will be visible. And you'll be able to open up any of these items where a question was asked and be able to see what the answer is to that. So that'll just be a way of us kind of committing to you that any questions we didn't have time to answer directly in the workshop, we are going to go ahead and answer those. I noticed a question in the chat as well. We are also going to share this later as a video. So you'll have a chance to probably after next week when we do this workshop one more time, we'll compile a video for you of the best bits and you'll be able to see that and go back through it.
Fantastic. Alyssa, was there one other thing that you wanted to touch on before we wrapped up today?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do our best practice, of course, of sharing some feedback for our workshop. So it's important, I'm sure you know, as facilitators, to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that we get some good feedback from folks as the workshop wraps up. So I want to invite you to join me on this last light bulb view here. It's going to look a little familiar, similar to our best practices one. But this is where I'd love for you to enter in some thoughts you have about what you've seen in terms of workshopping capabilities. So what are some things you've seen that you really like? And you can go ahead and double click here. Or if you are not in the story with us, I will drop a form for you. You can also enter in items that you wish worked a little bit differently. It might be that they do actually work that way. We just didn't show you that particular thing. But go ahead and let us know where you saw something and thought, gosh, if it would just work slightly differently, that would be perfect for me. And then over on this last view, the I wonder section, anything you didn't see, you think, in the workshopping that I do, here's an activity that we often do that I don't see how I can do that in this tool. Let us know, because again, we're constantly adding new features and trying to improve our workshop game. So please let us know what are some things that you wonder about or would like to see in the product. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to finish that out. And please do go ahead and add those in. I'm going to see if the chat window will open for me. There we go. And I'll add in that form for you. And go ahead and submit those. And then while you're working on that, I did want to show you just one additional view. Another view that uses smart zones. So if I go over to this story, and go ahead and keep submitting items if you like, but you can also look at my screen. Here's an example where someone has taken a format that they use often, just a simple business model canvas, and they've actually embedded that as the background of their view. And what they've done is they've added some smart zones so that any item that gets dragged into these various boxes is going to automatically be given that value of that type, that area of the canvas. So for instance, if I think that time dedicated to continuous improvement is one of our resources right now, you can see as I'm moving that item, it's highlighting, which box I'm adding it to. And when I add it to there, the image on the front changes, showing me that now I've assigned this as a key resource. Another cool thing they did with this particular view is they added a way to kind of put items into a parking lot, so to speak. So if something doesn't quite fit on the business model canvas and they want to put that aside for later, all they have to do is drag something down to this area and you'll notice it disappears. Now it hasn't been erased. What it's done is this particular smart zone has added the value of parked to this item. This view has filtered out parked items. And now if I go to my parked view, I can see, there are the items that I put in the parking lot, and we can come back to these later as a group and talk about those in another context. So just wanted to show you that. I thought that was very cool that someone had done with a business model canvas with smart zones. And just another idea, again, for taking the kind of workshops that you already regularly do and adding those into SharpCloud. So let's check back in. Looks like we see some really great ideas coming in. Lots of likes. That's what we love to see. Some things that we wish worked differently. That's fantastic. If you submitted your name, maybe we'll follow up with you and let you know if there's a way to achieve what you wished you were seeing, as well as those who put in something that you wonder about. Hopefully you did let us know your name when you submitted those so we can follow up with you. But we'd love to continue this conversation. Should we jump back and answer a few more questions?
Yeah, happy to jump back and answer more questions if we've got time.
Yeah, excellent. I'll pull that view back up. And let's see, did we get to this one? Facilitator view. How do you ensure that all are focusing the same view as a facilitator? So one way that we've done that today is by hiding and revealing views as we go along. We've left maybe more views open than we absolutely needed to, but we wanted you to be able to kind of pop back and forth a little bit. But for the most part, you'll see that we've tried to hide a lot of the views. If I open up this view strip and look at all of them, you can see a ton of the views that we've hidden along the way. So that's one thing you can do as a facilitator to kind of keep everybody focused, because then they really can't go anywhere else. That's the only place that they can go. Good question. Should we chop down into some of these with 2 likes? Let's see, audience access. Do they need to have a license, or can their participation be via forms only? So yes, currently to participate the way that the folks who are signed into our story have been doing, they would need to have a license. But again, we're working on some different models around that. So if you are someone who does a lot of workshops, please do feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you more about this. But we do have the forms as a great way to get access for them to be able to submit items at the very least. And you can actually even create relationships via forms. It's not something that we did today, but if they have the appropriate access, they can actually also add relationships between items using a form. So it's got some really powerful features there just in the forms function. And then which forms to take at a start and how to build your initial chart. So it sounds like that's a question about how to get started. Again, we're going to release this story as a template. So if you currently have a SharpCloud subscription, we'll include it as a story zip in the email that we send out as a follow-up to this workshop. So you'll be able to upload that template right to your, right to your instance of SharpCloud. And you can play around with this, see how we did things, and use that even as a template for yourself to get started. Great questions. All right, I think we're down to the ones. Now we'll answer a couple more questions. Post-workshop reports. Is there a way of collating all the workshop data into a printable or PDF form? Yes, you can actually export your story. You can export all of your views as PowerPoints right into PowerPoint slides or as images. So that's something that's very easy to do in SharpCloud. And you can also take all of your data, the raw data that was submitted via your items, and we can actually extract that into Excel, again, if you want to do some further analysis, or again, we can set up integrations with various productivity tools if you want to take that data out. Great questions. In terms of relationship drawing, love how you could select the relationship and its attributes. How did you set that up? Great question, Julie. So Julie, I happen to know you are in a private instance. So those who are not on cloud instances, our public instances, you have probably not gotten this feature quite yet, but it's in a release that's coming to you very soon. So folks who are on, again, private instances, look forward to those with a future release. Great question. Toolbar, how do you toolbar like the relationship lines one? Great. Colin, I think you might be in the same situation as Julie, probably on a private instance, which just means that as soon as your company upgrades to the next version, you'll have that available to you. So pester your admins, but don't tell them we told you to. Here's a question about security. How safe is the data that's entered? Duncan, do you want to talk a little bit about our data security?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to touch on this. So obviously all of your data is going to be secured within the workshop story that you create. You have the ability to share the story and all the information in it in a couple of different ways, in terms of sharing it individually with a select group of users, or kind of doing what we've done today by putting this story in a team environment as well to manage those permissions for a larger group of people. If you're looking for a higher level of security for your SharpCloud instance overall, like Alyssa was mentioning, we do have the ability to set up on-prem or private cloud instances of SharpCloud, so that only your organization has access to it, and it's not stored up on our public cloud, if that's something that that you're looking to do. We do have quite a few different options in terms of sharing and different levels of security based on your specific needs. So if you'd like to reach out with a little more detail about what it is you're looking for, I'm happy to provide some more tailored feedback.
Great. It looks like we only have a couple other questions left. Go ahead and open this one. Loads of things that we showed, but not sure how to enable some of this stuff, and the best place to find the how-to. So if you look down in the corner here, we have a nice little question mark, and that will take you to both our Academy and our knowledge base. Our knowledge base articles are mostly up to date for all these new features. So that's a great place to go and check out what's new in SharpCloud. You can look for any of those features that you saw today and learn more about them. And then we will be adding a little bit more information, including the recording of this workshop into SharpCloud Academy as well. So if you are a user and you want to log into the Academy, you'll see that under our events community as soon as the video is ready. But again, you're also very welcome to email us anytime with questions. You can email training@sharpcloud.com if you just want a little bit more information about how to do some of these things, if you don't find what you need in the knowledge base. We have a question about versioning. Nice to be able to create versions of items to see history of changes during the workshop or post-workshop. That's a great idea, Chris. Great question. So there's a couple of things you can already do in SharpCloud. One thing you can do is look at the activity feed. So in the activity feed, you start to see a little bit of what's been happening with the items. Now we've been generating a lot of activity, so it's probably going to take a minute to load up for us. But that will show you who edited items, when they edited, and that will allow you to kind of see where the most attention was on various items. And you can also download that activity using this button here if you want to look at it a little bit more granularly in Excel. But that's just taking a little while, I think, because we've been so active in the story. Another thing you can do in SharpCloud is you can take a snapshot of your story and you can archive it you can use this archive button under our history tab and story setup here, and you can take a snapshot in time of your story. So if you had a story that had been worked on a little bit before the workshop and you wanted to kind of capture what that was at that moment, you could create an archive of it. And then after the workshop, you could come back and create another archive. And then you'd be able to compare those two and look at them. What that basically does is creates a version of the story that can't be edited anymore, but you can interact with it and look at everything just like if you were viewing the story live. So that might be another thing that you can try, Chris. But thanks for that great question. All right, we are just about at the top of the hour. I think we got to pretty much every question. I'm seeing maybe one getting added at the last minute here, and that's totally fine. We will make sure, though, to add some things into our answer panels so that you can have access to the answers to these questions throughout. I want to just say thank you so much from Duncan and myself for your amazing participation today. You've made this really fun for us, and you've done a great job doing some kind of proof of concept around our new features. Thank you so much for those who took the trouble to sign into the story and create an account if this was your first time in SharpCloud. We are going to keep those accounts open for a few more hours, but those will be closed down at the end of today. Don't worry if you already had a license, we're not taking that away from you, but anyone who received a day pass for this presentation, we are going to end those at the end of today. But feel free to look around SharpCloud while you still have it. And again, if you have any questions around how to create stories like this, how to create workshops with SharpCloud, we would absolutely love to assist you. Reach out to your customer success representative, your account representative, or again, just send us an email at training@sharpcloud.com and we'll make sure that you get connected to the right resources. If you are brand new to SharpCloud, first time seeing it and would like to explore this further, go ahead and email us at hello@sharpcloud.com and we will absolutely love to talk to you about how to make this work well for the workshops that you're running with your organization. So thanks again, everybody. Please encourage folks that you know to come to our workshop next week, Wednesday. We're going to run this at, I believe, 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So if you want to come again and have some more fun with us, or if you want to just tell somebody at your organization about the workshop webinar, we would love to welcome them next week as well. Thank you so much again, everybody. You've been fantastic, and we will look forward to sending you an email after this. Have a really fantastic rest of your week. Take care, everybody.